Today we'll be making Half Moon cookies, but if you're not from upstate New York, you know them as black and whites. It's a super easy recipe. You start with 1 stick of butter, 1 cup of granulated sugar, and then you mix that until it's light and fluffy. This should take about 4 or 5 minutes. So scrape down the sides of the mixer halfway through, and it should look like that. Now you add a 1/2 cup of milk. I happen to have buttermilk in the refrigerator, but you can use whole milk, 2%, 1%. It's a very forgiving recipe. 2 eggs, and then you add your extracts. It's 1/4 teaspoon vanilla extract, and 1/4 teaspoon of lemon extract. You can also use lemon zest if you don't have lemon extract. It turns out just as well and is actually pretty because there's little flecks of yellow in your cookies. Mix that just until incorporated. Next we'll add our flour. It's 1 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour and 1 1/4 cups of cake flour. A 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Mix this just until it's incorporated. And don't forget to scrape down the sides and scrape down the bottom. Sometimes the mixer doesn't get all the way to the bottom. You want to make sure it's well incorporated. The easiest way to make the cookies is with an ice cream scoop. It helps to make them uniform, but if you don't have an ice cream scoop, a tablespoon works just as well. You could also make them any size you want. This is kind of a level scoop, and the cookies end up being about 4 or 5 inches, but I've made them smaller and bigger, and they turn out fine every time. It's a very forgiving recipe. The full scoop makes about a dozen cookies. Now you need to level the cookies, or just spread them out a little bit. I'm using an offset spatula, but you could really use anything. The back of a spoon, a butter knife. And they won't turn out perfectly round because human error, but they just look more homemade, and no one will confuse them for store-bought. Place the cookies in a 350-degree oven for 20 minutes. Now it's time to make the icing. Start with 3 cups of confectioner sugar. Add 1 teaspoon pure vanilla extract. Now add somewhere between 4 and 6 tablespoons of milk. The trick here is to get the consistency of a thick glaze or a thin frosting. I started with 4 tablespoons of milk, but you'll see as I go that I probably added another 1.5 tablespoons. You want it to be pourable but still thick. Now you're turning the cookies upside down because you're glazing the flat side. And the trick to getting a straight line is to just pour it over in a straight line. One nice thick line, and then you can ice the rest. And remember, we're not going for perfection because they're homemade. To make the chocolate side, you add 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder to the vanilla icing. Mix well. And don't be surprised if you need to add another teaspoon or two of milk. To make the icing pourable. Now repeat the icing process with each cookie and the chocolate frosting. Pour on a straight line. And frost the entire half of the cookie with the chocolate. And that's all there is to it. They need about 10 minutes to set up, and then they are ready to eat. Enjoy!